evening, everybody. I want to welcome everyone to the Brevard City Council regular meeting of Monday, May 4th. And a big welcome to everyone who's joined us here. We almost have a full house. I love it. And of course, everybody that's watching us online. So with that, I will ask Dr. Reverend, introductions. Got so carried away. All right, let me introduce everybody up here. All right, on my far right is Mac McKellar, our city attorney. Then normally, we would have two of our city council members sitting.
But I ran them off.
But something happened because, well, we're missing two of them tonight. Normally, Councilman Lauren Wise would be sitting next to Mac. And then next to Lauren would be Councilwoman Pamela Holder. But they both are unable to be here tonight. So that's why you see a couple of empty chairs. Then we have Councilman and Mayor Pro Tem Aaron Baker. I'm Mayor Maureen Kopoloff. On my immediate left, we have our city clerk, Denise Hodgson. Next to Denise, we've got Councilman Gary Daniel. Next to Gary, we've got Councilman Dean Lytle. And on my far left, we have our city manager, Wilson Hooper. Okay, now that I've introduced everybody, now I can ask the Reverend Dr. Sherrod Kriesman of Brevard College if he would please step forward and give our invocation.
Let us pray. Our source, you who gather us in this space, we are grateful for the collective spirit in this gathering space. We pray your blessings upon all that takes place, the conversations we have, the decisions that are made, and all of us who are here. Bless us to show the highest of integrity and the highest of our own humanity. And we give you thanks now for this space, for these leaders, and the leaders who sit with them. Amen.
Dr. Kriesman, do you want to say anything about your role at Brevard College? And you are also the alternate pastor at
Brevard First United Methodist Church.
I knew
So
it.
I serve as the Dean for Spiritual and Religious Life at Brevard College. I help out at Brevard First United Methodist Church, and I serve as a chaplain in the Air Force Reserves.
Okay.
So a little bit of everything. And I, too, come from this community.
And we are so glad you are here. Thank you. All right, if everyone would please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Attention, honor, pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, Madam Clerk, do we have a quorum?
Yes, Madam Mayor, you do have a quorum. You have 4 of 6 members present.
Okay. I believe I need a motion to excuse Councilmember Holder and Wise.
I'll make that motion.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, they are officially excused. Council, you've got the draft agenda in front of you. Are there any recommended changes to the agenda?
I'd like to propose that we move item M2, the appointment of alternate member to the Board of Adjustment, to the consent agenda.
Okay. Any other proposed modifications? Do I have a motion to approve the modified agenda?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
The agenda is approved as modified. Okay. Folks, we got lots of seats up here. There's seats right in the front. Don't be shy. Come on in. Oh yeah, we got seats. No need to stand out there. Okay. Council, you got the draft minutes of the April 20th, 2026 regular meeting. Are there any corrections or modifications to the minutes? Do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
The minutes are approved. Okay, we are now going to move into doing some proclamations. All right. I tell you, May is a very popular month for proclamations. And for groups wanting to have things recognized. You know, we do proclamations to bring attention to something, to basically say that it is important, and we want to take a few minutes to recognize and to encourage our entire community to recognize and think about these topics. So yes, we've got 5 proclamations today, and I'm going to start with the first one, which is on Older Americans Month, and we are very fortunate. We've got Sarah Knapp from AARP here to accept it, and Sarah is also one of the members of the Brevard Age-Friendly Task Force, and she has been for 2.5 years, I think. Since the beginning. Since we started, yes. Anyways, we're glad you're here. Okay, proclamation number 2026-09, Older Americans Month. Folks, there's chairs. Come on in. Don't worry about it. Just come on in. We're a friendly group here. Whereas May is Older Americans Month, a time for us to recognize and honor older Americans' contributions, highlight aging trends, and reaffirm commitments to serving older adults in our communities. And whereas this year's theme, quote, champion your health, unquote, focuses on prevention, wellness, and personal responsibility as cornerstones of healthy aging. It encourages older adults to take an active role in their health, advocating for themselves, accessing preventive care, and making informed decisions that support independence. Whereas, through their wealth of life experience and wisdom, older adults guide our younger generations and carry forward abundant cultural and historical knowledge. Whereas, older Americans improve our communities through intergenerational relationships, community service, civic engagement, and many other activities. And whereas communities benefit when people of all ages, abilities, and backgrounds have the opportunity to participate and live independently. Whereas we must ensure that older Americans have the resources and support needed to stay involved in our community, reflecting our commitment to inclusivity and connectedness. Now, therefore, I, Maureen Kopoloff, Mayor of Brevard, do hereby proclaim May 2026 as Older Americans Month in the city of Brevard. We call upon all residents to join us in recognizing the contributions of our older citizens and promoting programs and activities that foster connection, inclusion, and support for older adults. Sarah? Thank you. You want to say a few words?
Just to acknowledge in terms of this proclamation, in terms of the Brevard Age-Friendly Task Force, our focus is really toward establishing a safe and healthy and connected community for everyone in the community, so that people of all ages and abilities can thrive in this community, and the involvement of our older adults in that activity is just essential and very important. So I appreciate the proclamation.
And I want to say our Age-Friendly Task Force with AARP and the help of our police department just held a fraud awareness seminar a week and a half ago, I think it was, and a shredding event. And we've got an event planned in August on how to prevent falls.
And then in November, caregiving.
So a lot of important topics. So thank you.
Thank
And
you.
thank you for
Thank you.
everything the
Good.
task force does. Thanks, Sarah. is important because we do really treasure the history and preserving, what exists here. Whereas historic preservation is an effective tool for managing growth, revitalizing neighborhoods, fostering local pride, and maintaining community character while enhancing the livability of a community. Whereas historic preservation is relevant for communities across the nation, both urban and rural, and for Americans of all ages, all walks of life, and all ethnic backgrounds. Whereas in the city of Brevard, it is important to celebrate the role of history in our lives and the contributions made by dedicated individuals in helping to preserve the tangible aspects of the heritage that has shaped us as a people. Whereas the city of Brevard has 2 national registered districts and 18 of 23 locally designated local landmarks for Transylvania County. Whereas May has been celebrated as National Historic Preservation Month throughout the United States of America since 1973. Whereas this May there will be a host of events that have been prepared by local historical organizations and co-sponsored by Transylvania County Joint Historic Preservation Commission, whose mission is to help preserve the historic identity of the city of Brevard and Transylvania County. Now, therefore, I, Mayor Maureen Koploff, and the Brevard City Council do hereby proclaim and recognize the month of May 2026 as Historic Preservation Month in the city of Brevard. And I do want to mention that one of the things that we are celebrating this year that the Historic Preservation Committee is very involved in is the 250th birthday of the United States. The 4th of July this year is a big event, but we have other things leading up to it. You will see an awful lot of things advertised celebrating really North Carolina's role in both the Revolution and leading up to the Declaration in July. So stand by for a lot of events in the next few months. All right, our next one is National Police Week and Peace Officer Memorial Day. All right, and I see we've got our police chief, Christy Wenzel, and we've got Officer Ryan here, right? Did I get that right? Okay, got it. All right. All right, Proclamation 2026 TAC 11, National Police Week and Peace Officers Memorial Day 2026. Whereas the Congress and the President of the United States have designated that there be a National Law Enforcement Officers Week. Whereas the members of the law enforcement agencies of North Carolina play an essential role in safeguarding the rights and freedoms of the citizens of the state. Whereas there are more than 800,000 law enforcement officers serving in communities across the United States, including the dedicated members of the Brevard Police Department and the Transylvania County Sheriff's Office. Whereas the service and sacrifice of all officers killed in the line of duty will be honored during the National Law Enforcement Officers Memorial Fund's 38th Annual Candlelight Vigil on the evening of Tuesday, May 13th, 2026. Whereas it is important that all citizens know and understand the problems, duties, and responsibilities of their law enforcement offices and agencies, and that members of those agencies recognize their duty to serve the people by safeguarding life and property, by protecting them against violence or disorder, and by protecting the innocent against deception and the weak against oppression or intimidation. Whereas the citizens of Brevard recognize and appreciate the contributions made by law enforcement officers at all levels of government. Now, therefore, I, Mayor Maureen Koploff, and Brevard City Council call upon all citizens to observe Thursday, May 15, 2026, as Peace Officers Memorial Day, and May 10th to 16th, 2026, as National Police Week in Brevard, and that all of our people join in commemorating law enforcement officers, past and present, who who by their faithful and loyal devotion to their responsibilities have rendered a dedicated service to their communities. In so doing, they have established for themselves an enviable and enduring reputation for preserving the rights and security of all citizens. Oh. Oh. And do you want to say a few words?
Yes, ma'am. First, I want to thank the City Council and the city for recognizing National Police Week. For those of you who aren't familiar, National Police Week is a time where the families of fallen officers from the previous year are brought to Washington, D.C., where they can have fellowship not only with current law enforcement officers, but with families of other fallen. And this is extremely close to home for me. In the course of my career, I've lost 7 officers in the line of duty, to include my best friend, Charles Haste, under Watch 214-2005. And so I just really appreciate the city taking the time to honor those who have paid the ultimate sacrifice and their families as well. So thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. All right, and next we have Mental Health Awareness Month. And I believe we've got Ford from TC Strong somewhere in here. Oh, over there, okay. Oh, we have several people from TC Strong. Okay. Hi, and you're?
Leah Bush.
Leah, okay, well, wonderful. Okay, and we have proclamation number 2026-12, Mental Health Awareness Month. Whereas mental health is essential to the overall well-being of individuals, families, and the community of the city of Brevard, influencing how people think, feel, act, and connect with one another. Whereas the city of Brevard is known for its strong sense of community, natural beauty, and quality of life, all of which contribute to the mental and emotional well-being of its citizens. Whereas 1 in 5 individuals will experience a mental health condition in their lifetime, and stigma, lack of access to care, and social isolation continue to present challenges in communities both large and small. Whereas Mental Health Awareness Month provides an opportunity for the city of Brevard to promote understanding, reduce stigma, and encourage residents to seek help and support when needed. Whereas the 2026 theme, quote, "More Good Days Together," unquote, highlights the importance of connection, compassion, and collective responsibility in fostering mental wellness and ensuring that all residents have the opportunity to thrive. Whereas access to mental health resources, early intervention, and community-based support systems are vital to improving outcomes and strengthening the resilience of individuals and families throughout Brevard and Transylvania counties. Whereas local leaders, healthcare providers, educators, first responders, employers, and community organizations play a critical role in supporting mental health and creating a culture where individuals feel safe, supported, and valued. Whereas by working together, the citizens of Brevard can continue to build a community that prioritizes well-being, encourages open conversations, and supports one another in achieving more good days. Now, therefore, I, Maureen Koploff, Mayor of the City of Brevard, do hereby proclaim May 2026 as Mental Health Awareness Month in the City of Brevard, and encourage all residents to raise awareness, support one another, and take meaningful steps towards improving mental health so that together we may experience more good days together. And do you want to take a minute to talk about what TC Strong is doing?
Sure.
In
So TC Strong, we have a youth and young adult focus with mental health and well-being, really focusing on what was just said here, destigmatizing the language and the literacy around mental health, expanding that so that folks will possibly need or want in our community. It's really just us being human beings together again, and really showing that to our young people too. So we're very thankful that you are making this proclamation, and excited to be partners with you all.
And aren't you doing something in Clemson Plaza? Do you want to talk
Oh,
about
yes.
that?
Do you want to talk about that?
No, go for it.
Okay, so we are, and by we I mean Rick Emis and Mr. V at the high school are diligently working on what we're calling the Hope phone booth, where there will be a phone in a phone booth where folks can come and receive a message of hope, and then after the beep leave their own. And the intention is for these to be youth-inspired messages of hope, so it'll be a youthful voice when you pick up the phone. And the Hope Wall, 2 years ago, if you remember that, in the Clemson Plaza, we had, the impact of that went far beyond what we could imagine, and it now has a permanent home in Cedar Mountain. So if you are up in Cedar Mountain you'll see the Hope Wall there. So, yeah, so that should be installed within the next
Week. Just came from my workshop. Just look for the green TARDIS-looking phone booth, and if you know Doctor Who, you will find it, and hopefully find and reach them all.
And our intention is really to put the youth voice at the front of what we do. And we as adults can think that we have it figured out of what youth need from us, but we really try to center their voice in all of our projects and the impact we make.
We are so thankful for TC Strong. Thanks. Thank you. All right, and our next proclamation is Strive Not to Drive Week. And we've got Sandy Broadwell from Land of Sky, Gold Mountain Commuting. Do we have members of the Brevard Bike Alliance? Okay, we have one member. Okay, very good. Right? All right. Strive Not to Drive Week. Whereas bicycling and walking remain human-powered, energy-efficient, and environmentally sustainable forms of transportation that reduce traffic congestion, lower emissions, and promote public health through physical activity. Whereas the City of Brevard's Bicycle and Pedestrian Master Plan, adopted in 2021, envisions a city that is a premier destination for biking and walking, with a safe and expansive network of bicycle and pedestrian facilities connecting the city to the surrounding outdoor recreation and cultural destinations. Whereas communities across the United States, including the City of Brevard, are experiencing a growing demand for safe, accessible, and connected biking and walking infrastructure as more residents and visitors choose multimodal transportation and recreation. Whereas transportation is the second largest household expense in the United States, car-dependent households spend 50% more on transportation than households with more accessible land use and multimodal transportation options, and gas prices continue to be a concern. Whereas Transylvania in Motion provides public transit throughout the City of Brevard in Transylvania County. Whereas the City of Brevard has made significant investments to improve multimodal infrastructure across the city, including the Esteto Trail and the soon-to-be Acosta Trail. And whereas Strive Not to Drive Week encourages residents and visitors to travel by walking, biking, and riding the bus where practicable. Whereas Strive Not to Drive is a collaboration between local governments, nonprofit groups, and advocates like the Brevard Bike Alliance throughout Western North Carolina. Now therefore, I, Maureen Kopoloff, Mayor of Brevard, do hereby proclaim Friday, now listen to the dates, because this is when you're not supposed to drive, May 15th through Friday, May 27th. So everybody got those dates written down, right? All right. A Strive Not to Drive Week, and encourage the residents of our community and communities throughout Western North Carolina to use multimodal transportation options during Strive Not to Drive Week and throughout the year. Ladies? say anything?
Sure. So Strive Not to Drive Week happens throughout Western North Carolina, as Mayor Kopelov said. It's also happening in Buncombe, Haywood, Henderson, and Madison counties. And it's a really great way to get to know your community differently. If you don't already bike and walk around Brevard, you're missing out. And really thankful for Transylvania in Motion, Transylvania County Transit Service for partnering on this event, and the Brevard Bike Alliance. We have a free transit day if you'd like to try out the bus service for the first time on Thursday, May 21st. And the Brevard Bike Alliance has events happening almost every other day of the week. So it's a really good chance to get out and get to make some bike friends or route bus service for the first time. So just want to thank you for the partnerships. You want to say anything?
I'll just add that item K5 in your consent agenda is bike fun. So we have events all month long outside of Strive Not to Drive Week. And a huge one coming up on Wednesday is Walk Bike Roll to School Day. And we've got 6 local schools participating. So if you have a kiddo, we'd love to have you out there. But if you're just driving to work, give us a wave or a beep. It's really like one of the most fun days, and the kids love it. And then we've got a lot of stuff in Strive Not to Drive Week and some bicycle ballets. We've got one at the White Squirrel Fest where you can come ride your bike and we'll park it for free for you. So yeah, check us out and learn more about what we've got going. And thanks to the city and to Sandy for y'all's support.
Great, you have so many great things happening. Okay, thank you guys. All right, we are now going to move on to public comments. The public is invited to speak during public comment on this time on any topic unless it is a public hearing item on this agenda. And we do have 2 public hearings and they had separate sign-up sheets. Anyone who wants to speak must register with the city clerk, which is this. When it is your turn, step to the podium in front of city council. State your name and address clearly. Limit comments to 3 minutes or less and avoid repetition. And I will give you a warning when you have 30 seconds left. Direct comments to the full council, not to an individual council member or to staff. And our first person is Mr. Rodney Locks.
Good afternoon. My name is Rodney Locks. I live at 187 South Rice Street. I attended the last Health and Safety Committee meeting where Chief Wenzel presented her plan to address the issues expressed in the consultant's very done report. The report found a host of serious organizational and operational issues with the Brevard Police Department. Chief Wenzel presented a plan of action to address these issues. She also presented a path forward. The council, the citizens of Brevard, and visitors could see an accredited Brevard Police Department in one budget cycle. Brevard would join Hendersonville, Asheville, and Buncombe County as the only accredited law enforcement departments in western North Carolina. That can only happen if council had her back, supported her, and moved public health and safety up on the priority list by funding in the budget the program she recommends. Accreditation means Brevard has demonstrated a commitment to professionalism and higher standards. This is all predicated on council's next step. You knew there was a problem. You paid to find out the extent of the problem. You hired a person who could address the problem. You now know what must be done to eliminate the problem. What are you going to do? Budget to solve and move forward, or kick the can down the road? The ball is in your court.
Thank you, Mr. Locks. Our next speaker is Doug Powell.
Good evening. For all of the Star Wars fans here and online, may the 4th be with you. 250 years ago, there was someone considered far worse than Darth Vader or the Emperor. He ruled an empire, the British Empire, and his name was King George III. He declared himself to be God on earth, head of both church and state, and as monarch, he was in total control of the British colonies in North America. Fortunately for us, there was a small but tenacious band of rebel forces who stood up to this tyranny. They called themselves patriots, and on July 4th, 1776, this group of ragtag farmers, tradesmen, and clergy declared their independence from the king's tyrannical and unbiblical rule. In this Declaration of Independence, they announced to the world the 27 grievances or reasons why this kind of rule was no longer tolerable. Thanks to a complete lack of civics today, most Americans only know one of these reasons, commonly called taxation without representation, and falls number 17 on the list. Higher on the list of grievances, at number 10 is, he has erected a multitude of new offices and sent hither swarms of officers to harass our people and eat out their substance. One of the ways the king accomplished this was through unreasonable taxation, most famously imposed upon their tea, which was a daily colonial staple. Now, taxes and regulation often look wonderful on paper until you see the real effects it has on the average citizen. A good example of this is Brevard's own UDO, or Unified Development Ordinance. These are the regulations imposed upon new development within city limits. Having attended many city council meetings, it is evident that your highest priority as a governing body is affordable living for the citizens of Brevard. So imagine my shock when I attended the most recent county commissioners meeting, and the architect for the new county courthouse cited that the UDO costs totaled $1.14 million, which will directly eat out the substance of all Transylvanians through higher taxation. Despite being in a nondescript and non-historic area of the city's UDO requires street trees, parking lot trees, and additional vegetation totaling $125,000 alone. These aren't even one-time capital expenses, as the taxpayers of Brevard and Transylvania will be paying for the landscaping and maintenance of these luxury items every year via taxation.
30 seconds.
This isn't great timing given the substantial increase in property taxes last year and the proposal to increase our taxes yet again in your current budget recommendations. Again, I salute the City Council for your goal on paper of affordable living for our citizens, especially those older Americans on a fixed income. The question remains, will the costly effects of your policies make you look more like the tax-imposing empire or liberty-loving limited government patriots? Only history will provide the answer. May the 4th of July be with you.
Thank you, Mr. Powell. That is everyone that signed up for public comment. We will move on to our special presentation, and the city manager will actually be presenting his FY27. Huh? You signed? Harvey, if you would sign up, on the list where I could see it. There's all these spaces. Okay, I am sorry. We have a third person. I did not see Harvey's sign up on the bottom of the page. Mr. Sankey.
I didn't see it either.
No.
I like to hear other people speak before me. I leave that space. My name's Harvey Sankey. I live at 51 Lake House Trail in Brevard. Good evening, Madam Mayor and City Council members. The recommended fiscal year budget for 26-27 by the city manager shows a property tax increase of 7% plus fee increases over last year. And last year's increase was 8.3%. Part of the 7% increase includes a 4.4% increase in the general fund for the operating departments. I agree with this increase. It is necessary. It includes a 2.7% COLA increase for city employees, 3 new full-time positions in the Public Works Department, enhanced staffing levels for the Fire Department, and 2 new police cars for the Police Department. Well, what about the other non-departmental funds that make up the balance of the 7%, which is an increase of 2.6%? Are these increases necessary? If you reduce these budgeted items by about $200,000, you could bring the property tax rate increase to about 4.4%. The increases in the Housing Trust Fund, the Multi-Use Path Fund, the Downtown Master Plan Fund, and other fund increases in these non-departmental budgets, are they needs or are they wants? The impact of the 7% increase plus last year's increase of 8.3% on the house appraised at $595,000 is a burden increase of 29.8% over a 2-year period. 20.5% on the house appraised at $191,760 over that same 2-year period. This burden increase also includes the fee increases. You need to consider the budget of the lower income taxpayers to make their life more affordable. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sankey. All right. We got everybody that signed up. Okay. Now we'll move on to our special presentation where the city manager will be presenting the FY27 recommended budget.
Indeed, I will. Madam Mayor, I ask my colleagues to bring up my PowerPoint presentation, which they have there. So thank you, Mayor and Council, for giving me the opportunity to present my recommended budget tonight. I want to start off by thanking you all for your engagement so far. Building a budget is a tough thing, and it's even tougher when the board isn't engaged, but you are, and so staff have that going for us as we embark on this difficult project. I also want to thank the staff for all the time and commitment they put into this so far, all my colleagues, but I want to call one person out in particular, and that's Shawnee Cummings, our newest employee who's really shone brightly here over the last few months as we've put this together. Also, before I start, I want to beg your forgiveness here because I'm going to be talking for a while, and part of that's because I'm talkative, but part of that's because I got a lot to cover. But even with that said, I'm not going to cover everything. I'm going to cover the main points, the headlines, so to speak, of the budget. But there's some minor stuff that doesn't cost a whole lot that I'm not going to go over tonight. If you're interested in that, I recommend that you thumb through the booklet that I see most of you have in front of you because it contains that detail. And then finally, I want to draw your attention to, Aaron, if you'll hold your paper up there, this, which I put at your places right before the meeting. This is some supplementary information that staff has developed to try to quantify some of the possibilities that a few of you all have inquired about over the last week. So reference that during my presentation. I want to draw everyone's attention to that beautiful picture there on the right. That is Bracken Preserve. Bracken Preserve will grace the cover of our budget document this year. But the left side there is just a table of contents for my presentation. I won't dwell on this too long. You know, anyone who's interested in the finer points of municipal budgeting can go online and read this statute, North Carolina General Statute 159-7, better known as the Local Government Budget and Fiscal Control Act. I've only got the first page pictured here, but it's pages upon pages of laws that set the guardrails for what local governments can do regarding their financial matters. And of course, we have a corresponding local ordinance of our own there at the top on the left, which mandates that I prepare and submit the annual budget and capital program to the council. So I am fulfilling my statutory and ordinance responsibility to you here tonight. The act contains some transparency requirements, but we at the City of Brevard go above and beyond those. The first way we do that is the document in front of you. It's 200 pages long. Legally, it only needs to be about 12, but we provide another couple hundred pages of voluntary information to help you make better decisions, but to also make sure that our constituents are better informed. And then this slide also contains a number of other steps that we're going to take to make sure that this process is done in the sunlight. Putting together a budget is hard work. If you and the general public have felt that over the last few weeks, staff and I have been harder to get in touch with, I apologize for that. It's because we've been deep in the weeds putting this together. I hope after tonight we can be a little bit more accessible. But for us, the process actually started way back in December. On the left side of this slide are some of the key milestone dates of the budget season, and on the right side is the more detailed calendar that staff has been following. Council, you're not even brought in until about the 7th or 8th milestone there on the last slide, and that's your priority setting retreat in early March. This, to me, is the most important step of the budget process because it's where you tell us what you want us to focus our resources on in this document. And without that guidance from you, we'd be chasing our tails. We wouldn't know what we were doing. And so I'm thankful for you for expressing your priorities so clearly to us during that session. And the priorities that you expressed to us, the highest priorities you expressed to us, are listed there on the right. So now we'll get into the meat and potatoes of the budget. The things listed on the screen, particularly there on the left, are, in my opinion, the most notable themes of my presentation, the headlines of the budget, so to speak. The first one is that the FY27 budget is lower than the FY26 budget, to the tune of about $50,000. Now, in budgetary terms, that's flat, but technically lower by about $50,000. The money that is included in the budget, by and large, maintains all major service levels. There are some minor things that we'll cut back on, and it enhances certain select service levels. Mr. Sankey mentioned a couple of them: staffing in the Public Works Department and staffing in the Fire Department. The budget also focuses on maintaining fair compensation and benefits for our employees, even during times of austerity. However, it does ask employees to contribute slightly more to the cost of their health insurance than they have been historically. The proposed water and sewer budget socks away money for future capital projects, and the proposed budget continues contributions to the Housing Trust Fund, the Multi-Use Path Fund, the Downtown Master Plan Fund, though the later two at diminished levels than last year. With those headlines out of the way, how much is the budget? I'll draw your attention again to the upper left. The answer is $27,677,133. How's it funded? The information in that table on the right gives you a specific breakdown of the revenue we expect in a handful of different categories, but the info on the bottom left is probably the most notable information on this slide. It's funded via a modest tax increase and fee increases, specifically to fees whose collections before did not come close to covering the cost of providing the service. I'll talk a little bit more about these later, but the idea that you endorsed at the workshop was that the general taxpayer shouldn't overly subsidize a service whose benefits are enjoyed primarily by the user of that service. So, Council, our constituents may be hearing me talk about this and wondering, you said you were going to enhance services. How can you fund more with a smaller budget? And why do you need extra tax revenue to fund a smaller amount? And here's the answers. First, we're not funding more stuff. We're funding different stuff. Last year, we laid out nearly $2 million in cash for capital purchases. For the coming year, our capital liabilities are down to about $1 million. The second $1 million chunk is now taking the form of operating liabilities, like higher employee health care cost, like extra positions in the police department. So it's transitioned from one type of expense to another. The answer to the second question, and it relates to the first, why do you need more money to fund less? And that is because think about all those capital expenses from last year. And then think about the other side of the ledger, the revenue or the credit side. Most of those $2 million in capital expenses had a corresponding and offsetting revenue source, like loan proceeds, for example. Now that those capital expenses have been converted into operating costs, the revenue that's needed to cover them is now general revenue, like property taxes. I lost my place here. Y'all forgive me for a second. Okay. So I'm missing a slide here, so I'll just read my notes. That's not it. If you'll refer, for those of you with booklets, to pages 25 and 26, that was the slide I wanted to show here. Pages 20 through 26 in the booklet are the revenue section, and so there's a handful of pages there that break down our revenue issues. But pages 25 and 26 in particular, I want to draw your attention to. That is a list of our approximately 60 or so different revenue sources in the general fund. Our three biggest ones, property tax, sales tax, and interest income, have fluctuated. Some have gone up, some have gone down. Collectively, though, the projected natural growth across those 60 or so discrete revenue sources is not enough to cancel out the increased expenses we are expecting this year, or the expenses that you all have expressed a desire to add in order to keep our services effective. To make the budget balance while at the same time preserving those services and making improvements to the select services that I've already mentioned, we need more revenue, plain and simple. Y'all stoically acknowledged this early in your budget workshop last month, and you collectively agreed at that time to consider a 2.5-cent increase on the property tax rate, which is what I've included in my recommendation. This change in rate will affect every property differently, which we'll go over a little bit later. The main fee increases are proposed for commercial recycling and commercial cardboard collection. The former will increase from $5.75 a month to $13 a month under this proposal. The latter will shift to a tiered structure, with most fee payers seeing their fee increase from $2.15 from $10 a month. All right, now I'm on this slide. Our budget is actually 8 or so distinct funds, 4 of which constitute the vast majority of it, so I'm going to discuss each of those 4 in turn. The first and most significant one is the general fund, some basic information for which is up on the screen here. I need to explain this slide's format. On the left are our expenses by category, whereas on the right are the general fund expenses by department. The figures on the left merge certain departments together, so that public safety figure is both the police and fire department budgets merged together, whereas they're broken out on the right. The general fund is home to what most people believe to be traditional government services: police, public works, planning, admin, recreation, and so forth. Fire is typically a general fund service, but it's different for us for reasons I'll explain later. And this slide, as I said, breaks down what we spend in each category. I want to point out 2 things, 2 editorial comments on this slide. The first is that the vast majority of this budget, $10.4 million, is dedicated to public safety and public works services. Those are the services that, in my experience, even critics of municipal government think are essential, and where nearly all of the proposed increases in this year's budget live. The second thing I want to point out is that if you think the general government figure is high, remember that that figure includes the cost of providing administrative services to our enterprise funds as well. So what are the increases to the budget that I just alluded to? Well, in addition to the extra cost of just doing business in this economy, inflation affects us too. There are some service level enhancements that you all wish to consider. In your budget workshop, you indicated that you'd like to try and maintain or improve service levels in the Public Works Department by adding staff there. So this budget does so. It adds 2 extra positions in buildings and grounds and 1 in streets. These positions should at the very least help that department and those divisions keep their heads above water and maybe make headway on the backlog of projects we've asked them to perform. And those include things like enhanced greenway maintenance, right-of-way landscape maintenance, sidewalk repair, sidewalk construction, pothole repair. This budget also funds a change in how one particular public works service is performed, and that is our residential garbage collection. This budget would switch us from a model where households are allowed to have multiple 35-gallon, so small bins, to one 96-gallon rollout bin, similar to the one on the screen and similar to your recycle bin that you have at your house if you live in Brevard. The most notable thing to know, and the reason why about our current service, and the reason why changing to this model is a good idea, even though it's going to cost a little money, is because every single one of those 35-gallon bins has to be dumped into the truck by hand. It's why our ordinance dictates that the bins can't be any larger than 35 gallons because they're heavy enough at that volume. As you can imagine, this manual process of collecting the garbage is slow, dangerous, and sometimes dirty. And, if this matters, it's inconvenient for customers who have to roll out multiple carts to the curbside each week. So we want to make our garbage collection more like our recycling collection, where the machine on the truck can do most of the work. And this will make the curbside cleaner, our collection faster, safer, and I think that this will pay for itself in just the matter of a couple of years. So the budget includes the first of 5 yearly installment payments to purchase the carts. The cost of the carts over the total life of the loan will equate to about 2.5 full-time employees, so 2 FTEs. So roughly a 2.5 year return on investment. But I actually think it'll be quicker than that because, folks, I got to tell you, I look at our workers' comp requests as they come in, and I can't recall the last time I saw one that was for a department other than the sanitation division. So I think if you factor in some of those tertiary costs of this service, its return on investment will be more like 2 years. So if this budget is approved, I'll ask our residents to be on the lookout for information from us in the months to come on how this switchover will occur. The next enhanced level of service will be the fire department. Although as of today, I'm unsure exactly what it's going to look like. More on that later. But for budgetary purposes, both of the options that are in play right now cost about the same, and so the dollars are baked into the budget already. On the left here is our beautiful new fire truck. It's not a mere showpiece. They sent it out on a call the afternoon it arrived, and when I went out a week later to take this picture, it already had a sheen of road dust on it from use. So we have already put that thing into service. As I mentioned earlier, fire is a discrete fund, but that's for accounting purposes only, really. For budgetary purposes, I consider it to be an extension of the general fund because the fire fund's main revenue is a general fund contribution. And so the revenues that are behind that contribution are the typical general fund revenues. Before I go much further, though, I need to make a clarification. This is in response to something I heard from a couple of councilmen, and that's regarding some of the terminology that's been used recently to describe our fire department staffing model. Across several platforms, the word volunteer has been used to describe our firefighters, and I've heard it with the inference that their presence on the scene is voluntary, but that's not the case. The better description in the term we ought to be using is part-time. The men and women who fill these part-time positions are paid hourly and work full shifts. And when they're there, they respond to every call that comes in. The difference between them and the full-time folks is that they work fewer shifts over the course of the year. They're volunteers only in the sense that they volunteer to work open shifts. They don't have a regular repeating shift like our full-time shift schedule like our full-time people do. Between our 4 full-time firefighters and our pool of 25 or 30 part-time firefighters, we fill every shift with trained first responders, though the exact number corresponds with call volumes on the shift time. With that said, even though I think that our staffing level is adequate now, I also believe it makes sense for us to start moving towards a fully full-time staffing model. And here's why. Full-time employees are easier to schedule, obviously, and their schedules are more consistent, as I said. We don't have to compete for their attention with other jobs. Full-time folks can work on other projects around the station more consistently, and they can train more and get better at the details of the job. Full-time people can more reliably do the non-emergency parts of the job, like fire safety education, fire code enforcement, and equipment readiness. Long-term, and we're not going to arrive at that in this year's budget with either option, but long-term, the goal is to have sufficient staffing to field 2 full-time crews around the clock. During some portions of the day now, we have 2 full-time crews. We do have adequate staffing for multiple crews most of the time. However, a lot of time we don't. During the times we don't have multiple crews and an overlapping call comes in, we either have to wait for the duty crew to finish their current assignment, wait for staff to come in from home, on-call staff to come in from home, or rely on mutual aid departments to respond and provide supplemental response. Response times are the basic measure of performance for a fire department, and ours could use some improvement, not because our first crew is slow to respond, but because overlapping calls often make the response time to that second call an extended response time. Last year, 830 out of around 2,500 calls were considered overlapping calls and had slower than we hoped for response times for that reason. And so this staffing model proposal will help us start to eat into that and make progress towards a fully full-time staffing model in our department. Here is the actual revenue and expenditure tables for the fire fund I have in my proposal. Total 1.8, almost $1.9 million. It includes 150,000 increase for enhanced staffing. Again, the particulars of the staffing increase are yet to be determined, and we'll need to hear the county's decision before we know which model we will be able to fund. One notable thing, no matter what happens with the county's contribution and our staffing model, is that this budget will be smaller than it was last year, because last year's budget contained an $850,000 capital outlay for our share of the new truck that I just showed you a picture of. As you can see, this year's budget contains no significant capital expenditures, but as a reminder, Council, you've already committed to funding the next truck. The first time it will appear in the budget will probably be the FY29 document. Not reflected in either of these charts, but on pages 95 and 96 of the book are some higher operating expenses for fire that we think are non-voluntary, as in we must fund them. One example is a 4-fold increase in the cost of physicals for our firefighters. As you can imagine, firefighting is a physically taxing job, and so industry standards require that firefighters have frequent physicals. Up until this year, those physicals were performed by a local physician who essentially gave us a hometown discount. He's retired now, and so we have to pay the market rate for our physicals. I'll conclude general fund and fire fund remarks with a review of non-departmental expenses. These are sort of extra departmental expenses that don't fall neatly into one operating unit or another. On the left side, you see a series of orange and yellow highlighted lines. Those are the general fund's contribution to various reserve funds, including the fire fund. But also note a $235,000 contribution to the Housing Trust Fund and $47,500 apiece to the Estato Trail Fund and the Downtown Master Plan Fund. On the right side, you'll see our yearly debt payments for loans we previously took out to fund various expenses. There are 2 new lines at the very bottom there, and those display our first annual payments on the 96-gallon tipper carts and 2 new Brevard Police Department vehicles with equipment. Moving away from the general fund and into our other funds, I'll start with stormwater. No changes are recommended in this year's budget or in this booklet. Our sole focus in the year to come, and thus our sole expense, so the only one on the expense line there, will be the completion of the stormwater master plan work with our consulting engineer, McAdams. The next steps of the program will be a more significant part of our conversation next year. It's where we will review the results of their master plan recommendation, which will include a proposal for a new funding model. And so our discussion next year will include that discussion, as well as talk about which of the capital projects they're going to recommend we feel we ought to pursue first. I'll pause momentarily to let you read this slide. Switching to the Water and Sewer Fund. Again, you'll see that this budget is smaller than it was last year. The Water and Sewer Enterprise Fund is our largest truly self-sustaining fund. Other cities have electric departments. Our neighbors in Morganton even operate a broadband utility. Where I grew up professionally in the city of Charlotte, we had a transit enterprise fund and an airport enterprise fund. We only have a small utility fund here at Brevard, but just like Charlotte Douglas Airport, Brevard Water and Sewer is supposed to operate only with the revenue it generates from user fees. Like last year, I'm recommending that we intentionally over budget this fund so that we can sock away money for future projects. FY27, after all, will be the last year that ARPA money appears on our books. Our $13 million earmark that we got from the state a few years ago is now fully committed, and the cost of things we need to keep our utility going are only going up. In fact, just over the weekend, something broke that I can share with you here that will explain what I mean. We got our renewal quote from one of our chemical suppliers. I'm looking for Aaron. He's not here.
He's right in the corner.
Hiding in the corner behind me. And what was it? $80,000 more than it was last year? From 44 cents a pound to 65 cents a pound, and we buy hundreds of thousands of pounds of it. So we're going to shop around before we re-up with him, but that just goes to show the kind of increases that we're facing here. Therefore, I propose that in the water and sewer utility, we continue with our regular 4% increases to the consumption rate. So the rate a customer pays per 1,000 gallons of water that they use. The fixed fee, which is the fee that you pay whether you use one gallon or 1,000 gallons, I recommend we keep flat, we keep the same. But I also recommend that we raise by 4% our high-strength waste surcharge and our septage hauler fee. So the fee we charge those trucks that bring the contents of people's septic tanks to our plant for disposal. So in the Water and Sewer Fund, there are two new service levels baked into this recommendation. The first is a focus on non-revenue water measures. Non-revenue water is an industry term for clean drinking water that's manufactured at your treatment plant, dispatched through the pipes to town, but that you don't sell because for one reason or another, somewhere along the way, it gets lost. Now, some of this loss is to be expected. Water in a fire hydrant, for example, is considered non-revenue water. It's lost during its journey to evaporation. Some is lost during its journey to evaporation. Some is lost during maintenance activities. And so a degree of loss, as I said, is normal and expected. But according to this report, the industry standard is about 10%, whereas we're losing closer to 40%. It used to be higher than that, but Wesley and Dennis and their crew have over the last few years made steady progress in finding the leaks and fixing them and cutting down on our water loss. Though obviously we still have a ways to go. This budget allocates $300,000 so that we can buy the tools and the professional advice that we need to start systematically locating and repairing these leaks. That's a lot of money, but we think it's the kind of thing that will pay for itself in just a year or two if the project bears fruit. The next service level change, the one illustrated with this beautiful picture here on the right, is an enhanced FOG regulatory program. FOG stands for fats, oils, and grease. Now, I need to preface the rest of my remarks by saying that this isn't elective. We must do this. It's a condition of our wastewater permit issued by the state, and the state has sent us our friendly reminder, right, that we need to stand this up. The next reminder probably won't be so friendly. If you use the jargon that we at staff use during our budget work, we call this a comply with the big guy service level change. Now, the cost of this isn't high. It's just reclassifying an existing position in acknowledgement of the extra responsibilities we're going to give its occupant, reclassifying that person to a higher pay grade, buying some specialized tools and training for him, and some outreach materials that he can distribute to the folks who put fog in our system. But I bring it up here for two reasons. Not because it's going to make or break the budget, but first, because the budget presentation is just a natural forum to talk about changes to our service. And second, to explain why you see a series of new fees on pages 186 and 187. I didn't just want to insert those and leave them in there without any explanation. But both those service levels, the non-revenue water work and the fog work, should help us deal with some of the maintenance issues that have, over the last few years, really taxed our workforce, and if left unchecked, can accelerate the deterioration of our system, which could have significant consequences for our ratepayers. With that said, I don't want to send the impression that we've turned a blind eye to maintenance. The opposite is true, in fact. This slide shows all the large maintenance projects, about $30 million worth, that we're still paying off. So you see that the bottom line is not $30 million, but this is the yearly total of the debt service that we pay to pay back the money we borrowed to pay for those $30 million of improvements. And this table doesn't even include our ARPA funded improvements, like the Gallimore Road pump station and the water treatment plant improvements that are underway right now. And those total about $10 million. And then, of course, recently here over the last few months, we've won another $5 million from the state for new projects to help bring our system back up to snuff. So just some quick math here, $45 million with an M dollars worth of maintenance, repair, and upgrade activity to our utility system that's either underway or recently completed. All right, moving on. My favorite table. Folks, I'm sorry, I know the text is small here and you might not be able to read it. If you've got a booklet, this is page 122. This table gives the balances of our 7 large reserve funds. And this table is important because we can't fund all our priorities with FY27 dollars alone. We'll have to reach into our piggy bank to keep the momentum going. So I want to explain how you use this table. In the far left column is the name of the fund, and then the names of the specific projects that are paid for out of that fund. The second column in the left is the current balance of the fund as of March 31st, the end of the last quarter where we have full information. The third column from the left lists the commitments that we've made to spend from those funds. The top number being bolded and in red to indicate that those are debits that you have to deduct from the bottom line number. The fourth column, or third from the right, is the activity we expect in each fund for the remainder of FY26, so for the fourth quarter of FY26. You can see that that activity is mostly credits, but there are a few additional debits in there. The fifth column, or the second from the right, are the proposed FY27 contributions. And then, of course, the far right column is the available balance that, if you approve the budget, will be available on July 1st. You can see that most of these reserve funds are in the black with one exception, and that's the roundabout fund. And the roundabout fund, I just need to talk about it now. You've done 2 things recently to make that red number a little larger. First, at your last meeting, you committed to funding $20,000 in additional improvements to the forthcoming Wilson Road roundabout, which will come from here. And during your budget workshop, you agreed to defer making our typical general fund contribution to this in FY27. And you instead dedicated that money to help balance the budget in other areas. This is okay for now, because we don't expect these bills in the third column there to come in for another few fiscal years. But I just want to say now that we must prepare ourselves to start paying down that debt starting in the next fiscal year. The version of this table that you see on the screen is a little bit different than the one I showed you in the workshop, because, as I said, there's been activity since then. And, of course, I've added the proposed FY27 contributions. but you're gonna get another version still in your final budget book, because there's gonna be even more activity over the next few weeks. In particular, when I come back in the weeks to come with my smokestack funding strategy, I will recommend that we draw from one or two of these funds. And before I move on, I just want to address a question from the budget workshop, and that is regarding Fund 82, the Rosenwald Fund. The question was, is that $98,000 balance available for reallocation, or are those funds restricted? The answer is that most of them, in fact, the vast majority of them, are available for reallocation. So I wasn't quite sure, but Dean showed me the paper trail this afternoon. And yes, most of that $98,000 balance comes from a general fund contribution to that fund from last year that you all could repurpose if you choose to. Or you could leave it there as seed money for the Norton Creek Stream restoration when it is ready. I like to show those reserve fund balances before I show this table, which is what I call my supplemental spending plan. This is a way to reduce the burden on the coming year's budget by paying for certain things with a mix of existing dollars. And those reserve funds I just showed you are one ingredient in that mix. The next ingredient is savings in the current year. Now, those of you who've been around for a while know that a few years ago, my supplemental spending plans were a little bit longer because we had more savings at the end of the year. The phenomenon of making more revenue than you projected is still occurring, but it's not quite as pronounced as it was in those previous fiscal years. And so the amount of savings we have here at the end of FY26 to spend is a little lower. And this table is incomplete. You can see that it reads April 2026 draft. That's because there are a couple of things I want to fund with the supplemental spending plan that I don't know what the cost is yet, but I will have that to you before your next meeting. But I show this to you just to give you an idea of the steps we're taking to reduce some of the burden on the FY27 numbers. All right, so with all that in mind, and Harvey, thank you for previewing this for me. What will the impact of this budget proposal be on the typical Brevard taxpayer and ratepayer? These tables, by the way, are on pages 189 through 191 in your book. I present to you here the story of 3 residential properties, one of modest, one of medium, and one of high value, and the cumulative impact of our tax and fee increases on those households. These are actual properties in Brevard that I think are pretty representative of properties throughout the city. I know exactly which houses they are, but for privacy's sake, I want to keep that information to myself, except for one, which is the medium value home, which is my house. Again, Mayor and Council, I want to reiterate before I go much further that these are merely representative properties. In real life, everyone's experience is going to be different. Every property value is different, everyone's utility usage, and thus their utility bill is different, and every property's impervious surface level is different. And so some folks pay a higher impervious surface stormwater fee. If you adopt the budget at the proposed millage rate, 38.25 cents, the property tax bill for the lowest value home will be $47 higher. Combined with the utility rate increase, that household's total burden, assuming their utility bill stays the same, their utility usage stays the same, will go up about $55. My total bill there in the middle at the medium value house will go up $174. A $149 tax increase and a $25 utility increase, assuming my consumption stays the same, which is unlikely because I have kids that take long baths. The high value home will see their tax bill go up $294, with their total burden going up about $330. Now, there's a caveat here on the higher value home. If you take their net 2-year property tax increase, it will actually only be about $250. And the reason why is because that high value home got a tax break last year. Remember, the community-wide average value increase was 53%. So if your home grew in value by less than 53% during last year's revaluation, you got a tax break. And that house got a tax break last year, and so the net increase on them would only be about $250. What about the effects of this proposal on commercial properties? Again, every situation is different, but here and on the next page are some representative commercial properties. I want to draw your attention particularly to the refuse fee column. And then finally to the figure in the bottom right corner, which is approximately how much extra each of these entities will be paying under this new proposal. And again, I've shown a version of this table before, but I'll ask you to use this one because it has the most up-to-date usage information and thus the most accurate calculations. Would like to point out a couple things here. Belk and Charlie's Tire. Their refuse fee is going to go up a lot under this proposal. That's undeniable. But you got to keep in mind that both those entities are very heavy contributors of trash and cardboard waste. Under the current model, they've been getting a sweetheart deal. And under this new proposal, they would just be paying more similar to what they'd pay if they received this service from the private sector. Some more commercial properties here. Note Transylvania Regional Hospital at the top. The second table on here, Hunters and Gatherers, is particularly notable because it's the only downtown property on the list. And so under my recommendation, it would actually have two tax increases, their normal property tax and 2 cents on their downtown municipal service district tax. Together, for that property, those tax increases will cause their tax bill to go up about $300. They will be subject to the new refuse collection fees, however, so the bulk of their burden increase will be because of that. I offer this to you without much additional commentary, though I do have one more thing to say about taxes in general, and that is I haven't forgotten, Council, about the interest you expressed last year in trying to figure out how we can get involved with creating more equitable valuation policy. I will confess, though, that it's been a frustrating nut to try and crack, but I haven't given up. There's some ideas I've gathered that I'll bring to you for discussion far in advance of the start of the next reval, presuming the General Assembly doesn't throw the entire property tax system in our state into chaos. So Mayor and Council, as I mentioned early in my presentation, there's additional info in your book that I haven't covered here, including the nitty-gritty line item detail for each department's operating budget, plus some additional info on our smaller funds like the Bureau Trust Fund and others that aren't covered here. And I'll ask you to review those at your leisure. But I'll wrap up by saying that, in my opinion, this budget is an unfortunate product of the tough financial times we live in. I interpreted your instruction to me during the priority setting retreat and budget workshop to create a proposal that accomplishes the bullets on the slide. And I believe this recommendation does so. But with that said, obviously this is just a proposal subject to change if you wish. And if you wish to amend the budget, staff and I stand ready to receive and calculate the effect of any changes you propose here or over the next few weeks. That's all I have for today. The team and I will be happy to field your questions. We'll answer the ones that we can, or we'll take down your question and follow up with answers later this week. I don't need any official action from you tonight except for one thing, and that is I need you to officially call for a public hearing on the recommended budget for May 18th, 2 weeks from tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Manager. Council, do I have a motion to set the public hearing on the budget for May 18th?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, the budget hearing is set for May 18th. We will open it up for questions and comments from council on the budget, but first we will take a 5-minute break. So, 5-minute break, and then we'll come back to discuss the presentation. lost everybody. Well, we've lost our attorney, but that's all right. We'll proceed without him.
He was just.
Are we back on, Becky? Yes. Okay. All right, at this point, I'm going to open it up for comments and questions from City Council to the manager about the budget. And we will start with Mr. Lytle.
Great. First of all, I want to thank Wilson. It was a great presentation. I know that there's a lot of work that goes into what the final 15 pages of a PowerPoint presentation are, and want to thank you and the staff for all the hard work over the last several weeks. I also want to say that I understand quite well the burden that any tax increase might have on the public. And I don't want to speak for the whole council, but I'm sure that they'll agree that, it is very, very difficult. And it's like flying a helicopter. You want to make sure that we cover those things that are essential, but at the same time, we don't want to overburden the community in any way. One question that I have about the Rosenwald Fund, you said that it can now be reallocated. And from what I understand, everything that is earmarked has been done in that fund, save for the stream restoration. Is that correct?
Is that correct, Dean? I think the answer is yes.
I haven't requested total reimbursement, but I think we're probably writing out some checks this Friday, final checks, right? So
Okay.
all the money hasn't perfectly transacted, but that $98,000 should approximately that.
The projects money's been committed to them, and they are, if not all the way done, close to being done.
Okay, so the 44,000 that the stream restoration project will take is already taken into account in that 98? Okay, so the 98 is what would be a leftover funds. So does the 98 have to stay in that bucket, or can it be used anywhere in the general fund?
Anywhere in the general fund.
Okay. And then my second question is, with the increase in commercial cardboard, I believe that you showed me that the amount that we've increased to, which percentage-wise is significant, but still looks to be at least 50% lower than what commercial costs would be for that service.
Well, we set it at a level that would approximate a cost of a private service. I'm looking at Shawnee, right?
Okay. So is that to say that you said the closest to private sector when you said would be all three? What do you mean by that? All three would have the same alt three. Got it. Got it. Okay. Okay, so it looks like, okay, so, yeah, still significantly lower for some. Okay. Right. Right. Okay. Right. Mhm. Okay, and then the other area I'm curious about, and I believe, and excuse me, I think we talked about it, but the police cars that we're purchasing, I'm assuming that's because the number of officers are going up, correct?
We've tried to get into a regular routine of replacing at least 2 cars every year. So that is what was behind our recommendation for that.
And is there, what, I know the answer to this question is, loaded, but, what would happen without replacing cars for a year?
So staff members, I'll ask that if you answer these questions, if you'll come up to the microphone here so that our viewers can hear your answers. Chief, if you wouldn't mind.
Part of the request for the 2 additional cars for next year is we lost 1 car during Hurricane Helene that was not replaced, and we had a second that was totaled that also has not been replaced also in the last cycles.
Okay, so these aren't net new, they're actually replenishment. Okay, thank you. That's all I have for now.
Mr. Daniel?
Again, thank you for this report. I think it's very clear. I think our situation is made pretty obvious by this report. I really just have 2 comments. The first is, as you know, Wilson, in our conversations, wording is important to me. And there's wording on the hiring of new public works employees that due to increased responsibilities, I would like to make it clear that regardless of what increased responsibilities come to public works, we are currently understaffed. So I just, it's not because of things that are new responsibilities that are coming here that we need to hire more public work employees. It's because we are understaffed now. And they're overstressed, and I think that it's long overdue. The other thing that I would like to address is concerning wording is that the wording on the funding for the multi-use path and the downtown master plan fund, the wording was that this is half of what was there last year. I'd like to be very clear that City Council committed 2 cents to the multi-use path and 2 cents to the downtown master plan, which would be equivalent of $405,600. We were giving them $47,000, which is about 12% of the 2 cents that we had committed. That we raised taxes and clearly stated that we were raising taxes 2 cents on the 100 for these 2 funds separately. Each one was to get 2 cents. I'm not suggesting that we need to give them that. I just want it to be clear because I think there's history here that needs to be remembered, that we intended to be financing this at a much higher rate. And due to our current circumstances, we're not going to be able to do that, and I understand that. But I also think it's important to say, not that this is half, but this is 12% of what we intended to be giving them. So, but other than that, again, it's the wording that I'm concerned about, not the outcome. So, I think that's all I have.
Mr. Baker?
A couple things. And Wilson, do you still have the clicker if we want to go
I do.
somewhere? Okay. Just first, one way or the other, on June 30th or before, we're going to be passing a budget, and that will be 365 days since the last time we passed a budget, because by state law we're required to have a budget. The last time the state of North Carolina passed a budget was over 930 days ago. So, a little editorial, but hopefully we can get that done very soon. And could you go back to the households? The other thing I wanted to point out is that red number in the bottom right there. And this is last year, so this is last year's budget. Last year was a revaluation year. But I just want to make sure the public understands what that red number represents. That represents a tax break that someone who owns a $1.2 million home received last year. So the taxes, the city tax bill for that person that owns a $1.2 million house went down by $87 last year. Now, the reason for that is not because the city council decided to lower taxes on million-dollar homes. It is because the tax value increase of that million-dollar home was lower on a percentage basis than the tax value increase on those lower value homes there. And that wasn't just for that one home, I can tell you. And it wasn't just for residences either. There's commercial properties. If you can go forward one to the, go to the hospital for a second. The hospital, which is a for-profit hospital now, their tax bill went down $45,000 last year. Everybody else's tax bill in this room probably went up. And I say all that because I've been up here, I think this is my 5th budget. And I can tell you all the disagreements I've had with other people on council, we all care about the people who live here and take this responsibility extremely serious. When you're setting the tax rate, you are asking people to pay their hard-earned money to fund city services. And it's very difficult for me personally to work within this system that is established for us. We don't establish this, the state legislature does, when things like those red numbers show up for properties like the for-profit hospital or million-dollar homes are getting tax breaks no matter what we do up here. And before we get started, I just want to say that. One more thing on that. The state legislature has spent a lot of time on tax policy recently. The leader of the state Senate has proposed a moratorium on tax values, revaluations. But I have heard nothing about fixing that problem, fixing the revaluation system so that we don't have this situation. They're talking about pausing things. They're talking about determining what we can do with the tax rate up here. There's nothing about what causes a $45,000 tax break for the for-profit hospital when everybody else is paying more. Okay, sorry for that side tangent, but we're going to talk about our budget now. I think others have said it well. This is not a budget full of shiny toys or vanity projects that members of city council or city staff want. We're talking about firefighters. We're talking about public works employees who take care of our streets and who take care of our trash and recycling. We're talking about paying our employees to keep up with the cost of inflation. And it's a pretty bare bones budget, all things considered, year over year. And I think a lot of times narratives get spun out there about all the fancy projects that the city council is working on, and if we would just focus on the basics, I think fighting fires and public works is some of the most basic things we can do. So I'm proud that we're finally catching up, especially on the public works front. I think we have heard from the public that we're not keeping up with the maintenance that is required of taking care of public spaces. And part of that, a very large part of that, was just having the people available to actually do that work. So I think we get back to a place of hopefully catching up on some of those ongoing maintenance projects and making improvements for the public. On the fire funding, Wilson talked a little bit about our unique situation of sharing some of this cost with Transylvania County. And just for the public's benefit, I want to walk through how that works a little bit. So there are 8 fire districts in Transylvania County, plus the one district, you can call it the city of Brevard. Transylvania County funds 7 fire departments, plus we have our fire department. Now notice the difference between the 8 fire districts and 7 fire departments. That's because the city of Brevard picks up one of those county fire districts, and we cover the city of Brevard plus Sylvan Valley 2, which is the name of that county fire district, which we cover. Last year, the county added funding, and I could go into great detail on that, but they paid for 3 full-time firefighters at each of their 7 fire departments. The city of Brevard already had 3 full-time firefighters assigned to our department because nationwide the whole firefighting system is moving from a truly volunteer system to a paid staff. But notice that the city actually covers the city of Brevard plus that one county fire district. So we actually need more staff to cover both the city and the county. I know we have talked to the county about joining us in adding those 3 full-time firefighters, and I hope, just like they did for the other districts last year, that they will see that as a good use of funds, that we can work together on keeping people safe. On the employees, I know that this wasn't in, I don't think you covered this, Wilson, but we have plans for a future compensation study, which we did one a few years back, and this one would be sort of smaller and more targeted to just making sure we're keeping pace.
The last salary study made sure that the jobs that each job type was performing were appropriate for that job type, which sort of doubled the scope of the review. The next one will just be making sure that the jobs' compensation rates are comparable to competitive jobs in the marketplace. And that'll be performed in the year to come.
Okay, I'd like to ask, and I'm not sure where this goes, probably to the HR Finance Committee, but I'd like to consider having either that same group or an additional study that can establish the future, sorry, I'm trying to pick my words here. Establish, we don't currently do annual reviews in most of our departments. And we don't do merit-based pay in our departments. We've been keeping pace with cost of living increases and then doing these compensation studies every now and then to make sure we're doing that well. But I think if we're truly taking care of our employees in the future, then we need to figure out how to establish annual reviews. That seems like a basic thing that I know I've done in my private work. And so establish those annual reviews and then figure out some sort of system for merit-based pay for employees in the future. And then finally, I just want to talk about something that I brought up last year. We've talked about at the committee a lot, which is the status of the sports complex down on Augusta Road. And with the addition of the soccer field there, the amount of use that it gets, plus the skate park, the dog park, the Little League Baseball League that occurs there, the multi-use path that goes through there, the Augusta Trail will be not too far away here in a little bit. That parking lot is beyond needing to be addressed. I think I said a couple meetings ago that thousands of people use that facility every week, and somebody shot me a look like, "Are you sure that's 1,000?" And it is. I'm there multiple times a week, and we had an incident recently where a child was run over by a truck in the parking lot, and that is not hyperbole. The truck ran over a child in the parking lot. And not all of that can be attributed to the how we've laid out the parking there. But I can tell you it is a complete disaster. It's chaos over there every weeknight. And we have a proposal from an engineering group to reconfigure that parking lot, and we're going to have to pay for improvements over there. And we need to do that in this budget. I am not going to vote for this budget unless we know how we're going to do that. And so I'm not sure. I'm sure there are different strategies we could go about to find the money to do that. Perhaps the unrestricted money that's in some of the funds that we have set aside currently. I think I haven't fully digested some of the information on this sheet, Wilson, that you handed out, but we have to get that done because it is the, if you ask me, it's the most dire need in our park system, and it has shown itself to be a safety issue. So we've got to fix that. I think that's all I have.
Councilmember, there's some possibilities in this sheet.
Yeah.
All right, I think with that, Mr. Manager, do you have what you need in terms of the budget?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. Right, we will move on to our public hearings. Our first public hearing is the proposed amendment to the official zoning map of the city of Brevard for the hub. And our Assistant Planning Director, Aaron Bland, is going to walk us through this.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. So if you remember back in January, we enacted a rezoning for multiple parcels in the Pisgah Forest Gateway area to the new Pisgah Forest Gateway District. At the time, you indicated that we continue to reach out to property owners and try to implement that district as it's envisioned by the future land use map. We've kept working on that, and we have a request for rezoning from the owners of the hub to rezone the two parcels they own in that area, which are in the hatching on the map, to the PGX district. They own the hub parcel, which is 1.7 acres, currently zoned downtown mixed use, and then their adjacent 7-acre parcel, which is split zoned between residential mixed use and general residential 4. So this would get both of those parcels from 3 different districts to just one district, the PGX district. So that is supported by the future land use map. Like I said, this whole area is slated as the future character area for the Pisgah Gateway District. And Planning Board discussed this on their April 8th meeting and unanimously recommended approval. And in accordance with state law, they also forward you the attached statement of consistency and reasonableness. This is just for the public hearing. We're not requesting a vote at this time, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay, this is a public hearing. Council, do I have a motion to open the public hearing?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Public hearing is now open. Nobody signed up to speak at this public hearing. Therefore, we will officially close the public hearing. Council, do I have a motion to close the public hearing?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
At this point, we will open this up for questions from council for Mr. Bland, and we'll start with Mr. Baker.
I just have one question, and it's semi-unrelated, but the improvements that just happened at the Walmart over there, did those trigger any sort of non-conforming need to improve anything?
I did not review that project, so
Okay.
no,
Okay,
I don't think so, but I can't be certain.
okay. I don't have any questions on this.
Mr. Daniel?
So this rezoning, does that trigger any, in other words, will they have to pay their parking lot? I never understood why they didn't have to pay their parking lot.
The rezoning itself will not trigger that.
Okay.
Depending on improvements they do to the site, that might trigger nonconformity compliance per the PGX rules if it were rezoned.
Okay. So,
Mr. Lytle?
No questions.
Okay. All right, thank you, Mr. Bland. We will move on to our next public hearing. And our next public hearing is proposed amendments to the City of Brevard Unified Development Ordinance, Chapters 2, 3, and 19, regulations for data centers. And Mr. Bland will walk us through this.
Yeah, so just to go over the background really quick, back in February, you asked us to study if the UDO was adequate to address the potential for a data center or crypto mining facility, something like that, if they were to come to Brevard and request a permit. And if we felt it was insufficient, study the steps necessary to impose a moratorium. And so we did decide that it was insufficient currently, the way the ordinance is structured, and so that moratorium was enacted at your March meeting, and it expires on July 2nd. We took some amendments to the UDO to Planning Board at their April 8th meeting, and that's what's I'm going to present to you here shortly. They recommended in favor 4-1, with one slight modification, which I'll point out when we get to that section. So to go over the current ordinance, the way something would fit into it right now and why we think it's inadequate, data centers or anything like that, they just do not appear in the ordinance. There's no land use currently in the ordinance that adequately incorporates the kind of facilities that these things are, because they were not a thing when the UDO was originally constructed. But if someone were to come and request a permit for one, we would have to fit it into something that's in the use matrix. And so the closest fit that we have is heavy manufacturing. And so although data centers don't manufacture a physical product like this category is kind of centered around, they are a large-scale facility known to generate things like noise, light, possibly heat. They consume lots of electricity and water and other utilities. And so if you read that definition, a facility that involves dangerous, noxious, or offensive uses, or a facility that has smoke, odor, noise, glare, fumes, gas, vibration, or fire exposure, that's sort of the closest thing we would have to fit one of these facilities into right now today. And those are allowed only in the general industrial zoning district with a special use permit. So quick refresher on special use permits. These are approved by the Board of Adjustment after a quasi-judicial evidentiary hearing. When they approve a special use permit, they can attach reasonable conditions. But once that permit is issued, that land use is allowed at that land in perpetuity. It runs with the land. It doesn't matter if it's sold or the business shuts down, or the use is allowed in perpetuity. And the board hears each of these requests on their own merits. There's no precedent set if you approve one on this side of town that you should now approve one on the other side of town. Each case is its own hearing based on its own facts. And in making their decision, the board has to base their decision on substantial, competent, and material evidence that is presented at that hearing. And so what they're trying to do with that evidence is see if the request meets these required findings of fact. It's these 3 items that are required for the issuance of a special use permit: that the use meets all the requirements and specifications of the ordinance and any land use plan, that it will, if developed according to the plan, be visually and functionally compatible with the surrounding area, and that it will not be injurious to the public health, safety, and welfare. So those are the three things that a special use permit applicant is trying to prove at their hearing. And so when we reviewed this, we came to the conclusion that this is not the best zoning tool for these uses. While that hearing provides some sort of safeguard against negative impacts of those uses, they do not offer the real level of oversight that we think that you guys wanted when you initially brought this to our attention, several months ago. And so, while the board may consider things like noise, environmental impacts, the consumption of resources like water, electrical demand, they can only base their decision on those factors if it's brought up in the hearing. The members of the board can't discuss these cases with us at staff level, the neighbors, the applicant. Any of that sort of communication outside the hearing is not appropriate. And so they can only base those decisions on what happens in the hearing. And I'm going to say that a lot, but it bears repeating because, again, they have to make those findings of facts based on the evidence presented, not what they know about the community generally or anything like that. It has to be based on what is presented at the hearing. And so what they're really doing in those hearings is they're applying the zoning ordinance itself. They're not making any sort of policy decision or deciding what is sort of appropriate. The ordinance has already said it might be appropriate given the circumstances. And so it's a much more black and white approval process than it would be if it came to, for instance, you. And so there's also the potential for confusion because we don't have a specific land use that this fits neatly into. A potential applicant, if they're looking at an ordinance, they're not going to have any idea where they should be looking or what they should be thinking about. And then as staff turnover in the planning department might happen, different staff might interpret this differently and might put it into a different category rather than heavy manufacturing. So there might be confusion on both sides of that. So what we are going to propose tonight and what we took to the planning board is to create a new land use specific to this in the UDO. And so the definition would be a facility used primarily for providing computation services such as cloud computing, data storage, artificial intelligence, cryptocurrency mining, high-performance computing, and other high-impact digital infrastructure facilities involved in the general storage, management, processing, and transmission of digital data. These facilities house computer and/or computer network systems, servers, appliances, and other associated components related to digital data storage and operations. And that's a mouthful, but it's meant to try to encompass lots of different scenarios because what we think of as data centers can be lots of different things. It can be something that's absolutely massive, which is probably what most people think of when these come up, but it could be something that can fit in this room as well. And so we needed to have a pretty broad definition to try to capture all the different possibilities. So what we're proposing is that this use be allowed only in a conditional zoning district with the general industrial base district. And so it would be not allowed in every other district in town, and any proposal for something that meets that definition would come to you ultimately as a conditional zoning district. It would be a rezoning, site-specific rezoning. Just to refresh you on what those are, site-specific zoning ordinance with specific standards and conditions unique to the project. It allows you to tailor these zoning ordinances to a particular situation, and it doesn't have those tight bounds on the hearing as the quasi-judicial has. You guys have a much more open process that you can follow when considering these. And what you're doing in those cases is it's really a negotiation between the city, which is council, and the applicant. So that allows maximum flexibility to tailor those regulations to the specific site and the specific project. And you would also have the ability to impose conditions that are reasonably, to address impacts that are reasonably expected. And again, this is just a means, a zoning tool for the city to manage these impacts of potential large-scale developments, and that might be in sensitive contexts. And it's a good tool from a zoning perspective when your conventional zoning standards might be insufficient to protect neighbors. So the idea here is if you can't come up with typical rules that you just codify in the ordinance that every use has to follow, or every instance of that use, you should probably consider something more flexible like this, and that's what we're that's what we're thinking here, because they can be so different, they can be different in size and scope and purpose, that considering them each on their own through this process is probably more appropriate. And again, this is turning a quasi-judicial decision with those tight parameters of the evidentiary hearing into a more legislative decision by you. And just in general, our conditional zoning districts tend to be larger, campus-like facilities like the Brevard College. That's just sort of when we typically see those, but there's no reason why you couldn't use it for something smaller. Okay, so back to the proposed amendments. New definition, allowed only through a conditional zoning district. And so when we do that, when we add a new land use, we also have to add it to Chapter 3. We would be sticking this under that heavy manufacturing kind of category, but it would be distinct and separate use underneath that. And what this is where the planning board had their one modification. We had originally that B2, which said, as a part of a conditional zoning district approval, council shall consider the following potential negative impacts: lighting, noise, and city utility capacity. Now, it's really just meant as a reminder that when we start a negotiation for one of these districts with a potential developer, to remember those things. And the planning board ultimately voted to remove that section. And the one no vote was from a member who wanted to keep that section, not that they didn't like the idea of the rest of the amendments. We're also, since we're kind of looking at these high-impact uses, proposing some changes to other definitions to these. The heavy manufacturing definition itself, we wanted to mention excessive utility usage, or any sort of external impacts that are detectable from outside the building. This just gives us, another way to categorize potentially high-impact land uses into this category that may not be your traditional manufacturing that you would imagine reading that term. And then also class 3 utilities, that's basically a power plant. I added in there that this includes solar farms and wind farms. Again, just to kind of be clear, those uses weren't considered when the use matrix was initially created. So we're just trying to clarify some of these high impact uses while we're talking about those sorts of uses. The only other change is that class 3 utilities, we would also propose that be a conditional zoning district in general industrial instead of just permitted by right with no oversight, since those would be large, impactful facilities as well. So that's the overview of the changes. Again, there's not a lot. There's no specific language in there because it would be a conditional zoning district negotiated by y'all.
If I could add just one thing too, and I think, and only say this because I think there's a step ahead that some of council and maybe some of the public may be coming to. North Carolina is very clear that the Constitution of North Carolina has a clause in it that's called, that says that everybody is entitled to the fruits of their own labor. And so a blanket, you can't ever build a data center in Brevard would be illegal. If you said you can never build it anywhere, period, that would be an illegal act by the city. And so therefore if somebody wanted to do that. And so this is a reasonable way to say, you're allowed to do it. We want to have some say in how it is done and put reasonable regulations on that. So while reading some of the newspaper articles and looking at some of the things that get said online and out in the world, it may seem like people might want to say, "Oh, just let's don't do it at all." That would not be allowed by law, and so this is a way for the city to be able to take to look at each project individually and say, is this something that's going to fit in our city? And so I just think that's something important to bear in mind. And this would give us, this conditional zoning district gives us the maximum flexibility to make sure that if a project comes to our town, that we will be able to say, yes, this works, or no, it doesn't, or it will work if you do X or Y or Z. And so, because just saying no is not an option.
Yeah, and that's why I said we have to put it into one category that we have. And so instead of being stuck with trying to force a, square peg in a round hole, we create a new use where it clearly falls into it, then that allows us to not have any of that ambiguity. One last thing I'll mention, when we initially kind of reviewed the ordinance for these after that March request, there are a couple other options. I mean, one is we could do nothing and just continue to rely on that interpretation that it's heavy manufacturing and rely on the special use permit process. Or we could amend the definition of heavy manufacturing itself to explicitly include these sorts of uses or any sort of like high utility consumer. You could point sort of any of those uses to heavy manufacturing, and again, rely on the special use permit process. We didn't think that was flexible enough or gave enough assurances, like Mac just said. So that's why we went with the conditional zoning, our recommendation, and what the planning board heard and recommended. But since we were asked to come up with options and study the ordinance, that's just the other things we came up with as well. So I wanted to share those just for the sake of completeness. But so yeah, that's the presentation. I'm happy to go back and we can look at the different sections of the amendments if you want, or I can answer any other questions.
Thank you, Ms. Bland. This is a public hearing, so we're going to go ahead and open the public hearing. But I appreciate you, and I appreciate our city lawyer making it very clear that, within the law, this is really the maximum safeguards we can put in place to make sure that we've got the level of oversight that we need if a data center ever wanted to come here. So with that, I need a motion to open the public hearing.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Public hearing is open, and I will read the rules. Public is asked to adhere to the following guidelines for the public hearing. Register with the city clerk by printing your name, address, and phone number on the sign-in sheet. When it is your turn, step to the podium in front of city council. State your name and address clearly. Be concise, avoid repetition, and limit your comments to 5 minutes or less. And I will tell you when you have 30 seconds left. Direct comments to the full council, not to an individual council member or to staff. This is a time to provide your comments, but not to ask questions. A public hearing is not an appropriate venue for a question and answer session. Okay? And I will call you up in the order that you signed. Our first speaker is Philip Heath. Did I get that right? Up to the microphone, please.
Philip Heath, 71 Cedar Crest Drive, Brevard, North Carolina. I grew up here. I just don't want to see the resources go away. Talk about the river that's coming down, Davidson River. We're already in a drought. That's all I got to say.
Thank you, Mr. Heath. Our second speaker is Tammy Heath.
Good evening, City Council, Madam Mayor. My name's Tammy Heath, 71 Cedar Crest Drive, Brevard, North Carolina. And in light of there not being legally able to say no data centers here, we have a unique, very unique town where tourists from miles away come to see us here in Brevard. And I don't want to see our natural resources and beauty of our area go to a data center where it's taking more of the resources than it's giving to our community and our people. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Heath. Our next speaker is Rebecca Nunnessy? Nunnally.
My name is Rebecca Nunnally. I live at 29 West French Broad Street, Suite 304, Brevard. And I am very encouraged to hear that you are addressing this situation before a request actually came before you. And I am encouraged that you are putting in sounds like the strongest guidelines that are available legally, because I think it indicates that you share possibly my views that, as expressed by the two previous speakers, that we do have a very special area. We are already in a severe drought. We are very dependent in our economy on tourism, and if we see the usage for electricity, for water, and its impact on the environment as far as increased temperatures even, and without providing a lot of additional jobs, that we're going to have a very bad impact on our local economy if we do allow data centers to come in just without giving due consideration to its impact. So thank you for addressing that.
Thank you, Ms. Nunnally. Our next speaker is Blaise McCall.
Hey, my name is Blaise McCall. I live at 432 North Country Club Road. Born and raised here, 32 years, veteran. The biggest thing for me is I'm an avid outdoorsman. I love hunting, I love fishing, I love all that. Data centers raise the temperature of the water. Trout, if you don't know, they get lethargic over 65, 67 degree water temps, which we're already reaching in the summer times here. So it's already an issue. Besides that, it would limit we already have a limited for public use of rivers besides just in the forest because of private property and stuff like that, which is understandable. But I don't know. I don't like the idea of it. And Clay County also put in some sort of ban, but they worded it the correct way. So I think that would be in our best interest to preserve the beauty of our county.
Thank you. Our next speaker is, okay, I'm having trouble reading this, Lane.
Lane Hurlinger.
Okay, thank you.
How do you spell your last
Yeah.
name?
Herlinger.
Thank you.
1131 Sutton Creek Road in Pisgah Forest. I'm not much of a public speaker, but I definitely feel strongly about the subject, and I appreciate everybody being here to, so I think everybody's on the same page to support and do the best thing to, phrase things the right way. We wish we could ban it, but if we can't, do the best thing to, make them jump through absolutely so many hoops that they don't want to, right? I know that some of the crazy stats are like, right, it could increase the ambient temperature 3 degrees Celsius. So you think your friends that you make fun of in Charlotte or Raleigh that, have to suffer through the heat on our nice, cold spring days. That could be a thing within 6.2 miles of a data center. It can raise the temperature 3 degrees Celsius, which I don't know what that converts to Fahrenheit. I'm not that smart, but it's quite a bit. That increase, I'm sure, could totally kill species that are, endemic to this area, right? We're extremely special tropical rainforest, temperate rainforest, which doesn't feel like it right now, but most of the time we are. Imagine how less it would be with a data center here. When you're supporting data centers, you're supporting businesses like Google, Facebook, mega companies that, to me, are essentially useless and aren't, I guess they have some uses, but I don't necessarily support them. I have a small business, and I answer my phone when people call. If you try to call Google, there is no phone number, and Facebook, there is no phone number. So you're supporting businesses that don't even have a face. They just kind of exist. Data centers, to me, are they're the driving force to those businesses. They rape the resources. They're terrible for health. You think if, within 6.2 miles, they could affect you. So let's say they put one where the old Augusta was, 6.2 miles away where crow flies is pretty far. I imagine it gets here, right? It gets almost to Mills River. It gets all over the place. I don't know anybody, liberal, Republican, young or old, that is in support of them. I don't know who the people are that
want them. But, I believe there's not too many in this room. I heard a story a while back about a brewery. I'm not going to mention the name, but it was putting warmer water into the French Broad, right? It was using the water and then, putting the water back into the French Broad at a temperature that was higher than they were allowed to do. Well, they received a fine from the EPA, and when they received the fine, they said, that's it? And they just kept doing it until they decided that, they actually had to change something. You think about a company like a data center, that money is like an infinite thing, or a cryptocurrency miner or something like that. EPA fines or rules that we put on them once they're established, money may not be a thing. So any kind of fines or regulations or, things that we may incur to them may not be even enough to stop them or change it, I appreciate everybody listening, but, I appreciate you all doing everything you can to, if you are in for it, to put all those, orders in place to really try to make it suck for them. But I appreciate y'all. Sorry for my rant.
Thank you. All right, that is everybody that signed up for the public hearing. I need a motion to close the public hearing.
So moved.
I need a second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Public hearing is closed. We will now open it for council's questions and comments. Mr. Daniel.
Well, I appreciate staff looking into this, and with the realization that the state legislature pretty well ties our hands on the ultimate resolution of this, which I would believe that most of us would have supported, which is not to have them be allowed to come here. But if we can't, we will have as much.
And Mr. Daniel, I will let you know that the state could maybe pass a law completely. The legislature could, depending on how they interpret the fruits of your labor clause. But and in fact, there have been a couple of bills put in the legislature, but they haven't yet.
Well, fingers are crossed. It's been commented on the rumors on Facebook, and I would like to address one thing, and that is the Acosta site. That site is under a special use permit, is that not correct?
It has a conditional zoning district and a development agreement,
Which means that it cannot have a data center.
not without completely renegotiating all of that.
So that is just kind of off the wall where that rumor came from, because it's not allowed there now, even though there are other places that it might be allowed, but I just want to clarify that. So.
Mr. Lytle?
Sure, I've got I'm not a good lawyer, Mac. So forgive me if some of my questions are off the wall. Do we legally have to supply utilities to a commercial building if we don't want to?
If it's within the city limits and our utilities, which are water and sewer, yes, we do.
Okay. Can we put, can we make a capacity threshold? In other words, if there's one commercial building that uses over X amount of water threshold, you can use up to a certain amount, and we don't supply it above that?
We don't currently have that within our ordinance. There is, it's not one of those things that has been looked at, simply because we've always looked at it from the other direction.
Right.
We want to provide as much as we can. So so the short answer is it's not in our ordinance currently. I don't know if that's something we want to do, but that's another way to look at addressing some of the issues. My understanding is that with these data centers, the bigger issue is electricity, and we don't have the electricity, so that's not our thing.
Can you repeat what you said about the paragraph that the committee voted against putting in? I didn't quite
Yes.
understand.
So, in this section 3, where it would kind of sit, where it chapter 3 enumerates all the specific conditions of all the different uses, and so you might see a lot for certain land uses and nothing for others. But so on this page, that B1, there would have been a B2 that said, let me just bring it back up so I get it right. As a part of a conditional zoning district approval, council shall consider the following potential negative impacts: lighting, noise, and city utility capacity.
And can you elaborate why the planning board wanted to remove that?
Because the conditional zoning district is a negotiated process where essentially everything's on the table anyway, it just sort of seems silly to put something in there that you just needed to consider. Again, our viewpoint was a sort of a reminder, if this comes up, at least those things get mentioned. The board kind of thought they would get mentioned anyway. So just sort of thought it was silly to put something in there that's not like a truly legally enforceable condition.
Got it. Okay, that's all my questions.
Mr. Baker?
Yeah, I just want to thank staff for moving quickly on this. I think we were alarmed that, we felt like we didn't have the protection we needed to be able to address this if it popped up, and I think the moratorium was the right thing to do, and I also think we're headed in the right direction with what we're talking about here. I just want to clear up one thing. You said the word flexible a lot, and I think I just want to make sure the public understands that the flexibility we're looking for is the flexibility on our side, the city side, the public, the public's representatives, the city council,
Yeah, the
our
flexibility
ability.
goes both ways.
Right, the flexibility in order to address this if a company said, we're looking to bring a data center here. And you said this, I think, but the Board of Adjustment process is just much more rigid and has very specific requirements of their board members in terms of the information they can use when they're making their decisions versus up here.
It's quasi-judicial, which
Right.
means that it's almost like a court, and people have to come forward and give evidence, and only certain people, the Board of Adjustment would not even be able to hear from the public. No information could be presented from the public
Right.
as to how they felt about it, whereas the city council would be able to accept info from the general public at large.
Right. So
As to what their wishes were.
Board of Adjustment was the old system.
Yeah.
City council would be the new.
That's
setup. Right. The other thing about that is that, the Board of Adjustment is appointed by the folks up here. The folks up here are appointed and elected by the people. And so if we're talking about rules that have to exist for a long time, some of us might not be up here, all of us won't be up here at some point. And if some rogue city council said, let's build the biggest data center in the world here in Brevard, they're responsible, or they're responsive to the public, and the public could take action at that point. So I think this is the right way to go, and it's one of the most important things I think we've addressed recently, and I'm glad we jumped on it, and I think it's a testament to staff that they moved quickly and efficiently and got us a solution that I think is going to work well for us. So thank you.
All right, thank you. And we will move on. That finishes the public hearings. We have the consent and information agenda. The following items are on consent. 1, property tax releases of April 2026. 2, resolutions requesting approval from NCDOT for public art in Acusta Road and Pisgah Forest roundabouts. 3, proclamation number 2026-14, Municipal Clerks Week. 4, proclamation number 2026-15, Public Service Recognition Week. 5, proclamation number 2026-16, National Bike Month. 6, Parks, Trails, and Recreation Committee meeting minutes, March 18th, 2026. 7, Finance and Human Resources Committee meeting minutes, February 23rd of 2026. 8, Finance and Human Resources Committee meeting minutes, March 31st of 26. 9, Public Safety Committee meeting session notes, February 23rd of 26. 10, Public Safety Committee meeting minutes, March 23rd of 26. And number 11, appointment of alternate member to the Board of Adjustment. Do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Consent is approved. Moving on to unfinished business. We have the proposed amendments to the City of Brevard Code of Ordinances, Chapter 38, 42, and 66, Special Event Regulations. And Emily Brewer, our senior planner, is going to walk us through this.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. A special event is an organized gathering open to the public or with invited guests that uses public spaces and public rights-of-way like roads, greenways, and plazas. When you think of a special event, you always think of parades, races, festivals, block parties, concerts, and other items like that. Special events play a very critical role in the vibrancy of our community, creating a place for economic opportunity, arts, culture, and community. This is a staff-initiated text amendment to review the ordinance and procedures in order to clarify the permitting and, in order to update the special event regulations, clarify the approval process, update the requirements, and continue to improve our large-scale events. Section 66-13 of Brevard City Code is where those regulations live. And the purpose of those requirements is to protect the public health, safety, and welfare during those events, ensure adequate coordination of public services like police, fire, public works, and EMS, minimize disruption to residents, businesses, traffic circulation, and public infrastructure, and finally, to balance community vibrancy and economic activity with neighborhood compatibility and welfare. The Public Safety Committee reviewed these changes on March 4th of 2026 and unanimously recommended in favor of adoption, and then you, City Council, held a public hearing on this matter on April 20th of 2026. So tonight, we are asking that you take one of the following actions. You can adopt the amendments as presented, you can revise the amendments and adopt those, reject the amendments, or table it for further consideration. And in your packet, you also have information about what a special event guidebook would be. The adopting ordinance enables staff to be able to put forth procedures and regulations for us to be able to move through the permitting process with those special events. So not only would it be adopting the amendments in this attached ordinance, or excuse me, in this attached draft ordinance, it would be adopting the amendments and instructing staff to continue to review our policies and practices for permitting. Thank you.
Thank you, Emily. Council, do I have a motion regarding the proposed amendments? Does anyone want to make a motion to adopt the amendments as presented?
I'll make a motion, we adopt the amendments as presented.
I'll
Thank
second
you.
it.
All right. We'll now open it for discussion. Mr. Baker.
I don't have anything. I think it's a good move, and I can't believe that nobody stayed to discuss this. Shocking.
Mr. Lytle.
No, just thanks for all the work and this, and it was staff initiated, so thanks for proactivity.
Mr. Daniel.
I have no comment other than it makes a lot of sense, and we should move forward.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. All right. We will move on to our new business, and that is the purchasing policy update. And I believe our finance director Mr. Dean Luby is going to walk us through this.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council. I will try to be brief. Since really the beginning of the calendar year, David Todd has brought up some issues with our purchasing policy, which we feel, upon looking into, that we needed to make some revisions. 4 of them are listed, and we first brought these before the Finance, Human Resources, and Citizens Appointment Committee in February. It was meant to come back in March, but I wasn't quite ready, so we tabled it. But we did bring it back in April, actually just last Monday on the 27th, I think it was. There's 4 main areas that we were trying to have changed. I'm first going to focus on 2 of them that I sort of consider maybe the simple ones, and then we'll focus on the ones that got a lot of back and forth at the last committee meeting. On section 2.10B, the original policy was written that any recurring purchase agreements that we have of over $10,000, we wanted to review every 3 years. Upon further review, I think we had more of those than we anticipated, so we want to raise that limit to 25,000. I will say that nowhere is this, the state has no requirement on this whatsoever. This is something just that the city of Brevard wanted to put into place, that we wanted to make sure if we had a continuing agreement, that we were not just blindly doing that year after year after year. So we're just trying to raise that limit from 10,000 to 25,000. The other, what I consider simple change, is on 3.7C. There's just some verbiage involving cooperative purchase programs. These are really state or nationwide programs that we had. The way it was worded was, we said you can use one company called U.S. Commodities, and David pointed out that there's 3 or 4 other ones that were commonly used, so we added some language that said such as U.S. Commodities and a couple of the other ones, which I can't remember who they're called. So both of those are what I would consider rather simple changes. So the complicated ones were in sections 3.4A and 3.4B. And before I start, I want to just show you what the state requirements are. And where did they go here? Where's the J drive here? The state requires formal bidding of construction and repair projects over $500,000. And I'm about to bring up a slide here in a minute. And so in the 2 left-hand columns, first of all, if you're just purchasing items like a car or something like that, there's really no method that's required by the state. If it's under $30,000, you're allowed to use informal bidding up to $90,000, and anything over $90,000, you have to have formal bidding. Formal bidding requires advertisements either in the newspaper or on the internet. You have to give at least a week. Most of the time, people are given much more than a week to get their bid received. And then you have to set a date to open those bids. If you don't get 3 bids, you have to rebid it. So our limit for purchase agreements is actually at $75,000, so we have a lower limit than the state. But the issue that really got quite a bit of back and forth at the last committee meeting was on the second column, the construction method. So our current method, as you can see, the state, anything under $30,000 construction and repair, there's no rules whatsoever. Anything from $30,000 to $500,000, you're allowed to use informal bidding. There is no minimum number of bids that are required. So we could call, if we think we have a $460,000 construction and repair project, we could call up one contractor and get a number, and we could sign that, and we would be within state standards. When we set up the purchasing policy back in June of '24, this was largely done by myself, Wilson, and Alex Shepard. We we had much stricter requirements than the state. So what we required was anything under 30,000, the language in the current policy said we're requiring 3 bids. And then anything, we set the formal bidding limit at $250,000. We're the only government in the state that I've seen that's done this. David has sort of pointed out that at times, it's really hard to get 3 bids, depending on the complexity of the job, how much of a hurry we're in. Sometimes contractors, depending on the price you're talking about, they don't even, it's not worth their time to come out and look at the project. So at the April meeting, the Finance Committee ultimately, they voted 2-0. One member abstained on this vote, that we were going to make some changes that for construction and repair for 30,000 and below, we were going to encourage 3 bids, but they were not required. And then we ultimately decided to change the formal limit from 250 to move it back to $500,000, so that informal bidding would be allowed from 30,000 to 500, which is what the state actually has. And we were going to have language that says you needed to get, you're required to have 3 bids, but if you were unable to get them, management would have the discretion to accept less than 3 bids. Anything over $500,000 formal bidding's required anyway. So we were really getting kind of closer to the state level. Now, the committee did, we agreed to provide a quarterly report to the city manager and to city council of all construction and repair contracts that have been signed in the last month. And David and I are sort of working on what this report might look like. And it would look something, in fact, this happens to be one that we just did here in the last 2 weeks or so. There was a problem at the wastewater treatment plant, and you can see that we're still toying with this form a little bit, but we got a hold of 5 different vendors. In this case, we did get 5 quotes, or no, we got 3 quotes. 2 of them did not respond. We ended up going with the lowest quote here, or no, we went with the lowest, I'm sorry, with D.H. Griffin, right? Yeah. But we would provide this on a quarterly basis for all construction and repair quotes that had been entered into by the city. I also have another slide here that I want to kind of share with you that shows, Shawnee and I did a little work last week to look at what purchasing policies of other governments about our size are, just for construction and repair. And you can see, I'll just concentrate over here, from the 30,000 to 500,000. Most of them follow state statute exactly, with that they allow informal bidding, and there's no mention of number of bids. So really, our policy, the policy we had in place was very, very strict. Even the policy that we're recommending that you approve today is still stricter than any of these listed here. Because we're requiring 3 bids, but well, to be honest, a couple of them also do mention, like Washington here. They do want you to obtain 3 quotes, but they allow you to award it if you only get 1, which is pretty much what our policy is saying as well with the revisions. So that's what the Finance and HR Committee ultimately recommended, and that's what we're asking for the board to consider.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Luby. Council, do I have a motion to approve the committee's recommendation to update the purchasing policy as was just described?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, we'll open it with Mr. Lytle.
Yeah, thanks for the presentation and for all the information. And, at this committee, as Dean said, we went back and forth. And, obviously there's some sensitivity around the dollar amounts. But I think there was really good discussion on how the lower dollar amount can hamper us to be able to move forward quickly when we need to. and also hamper us from being able to, even get bids, and just takes up unnecessary staff time. So, and I think, with the proposed changes, and the commitment to come to council with a list of all of our construction contracts, so there's accountability there. I think it's something I feel comfortable with the changes.
Mr. Daniel?
No, I don't have any comment on this.
Mr. Baker?
Yeah, I'll just, there's always a balance between like fiscal controls and just, well, since my mom might be listening, I'd say getting stuff done. I think, the federal government just provided us an example of where with the Department of Homeland Security, and they had this thing set up where the secretary has to sign off on everything that's above $100,000. Well, that sounds awesome. Doesn't it sound cool? Man, nothing gets done without my signature. Problem is, nothing gets done. And with the hurricane response, we certainly saw that. I'm glad they've gotten rid of that. But, it's always a balancing act. I think we've struck a good balance here, and thanks to the committee and to Dean for updating these policies.
Okay. We have a motion on the table. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. All right, that was our only item of new business. We will open it up for remarks, and we will start with Mr. Daniel.
Well, I just, one thing I'd like to address a little bit is and I commented on it earlier when we were talking about the data centers, is I think folks, I want to encourage people when they hear stories that excite them or enrage them to reach out to us. Our phone numbers are listed. You can call us up, and we can help explain some of the misconceptions that you might be hearing. So, because I think there was a lot of energy that got blown up about this that was sort of wasted energy. You could have been doing something productive. You could have been calling us. So that's all I have to say.
Mr. Lytle?
Again, thanks to the staff and to Wilson with all the work on the budget. I've been there, and it is. I guess if you're a little different person, it's fun, but for most people, it's not fun. It is not fun. I will say, I just wanted to call out that we do in the budget, although it's not a hugely significant amount, is that we do help fund nonprofits, and I just want to say that we just really recognize the importance of nonprofits in the city. There's lots of them. And that's one thing that we know about the city, is that where government may fall short or can't help, there's always nonprofit filling that gap. And we do have, which I'm glad, we do have some in the budget to support them. And one of the things that we did do is focus on those that have really essential needs that provide that, like food and shelter, because we know in the next year, those things will get tough. So I just wanted to call that out, and all of us to support them as much as possible.
Mr. Baker?
Yeah, just one thing. I wanted to be sure the Municipal Clerks Week proclamation got relegated to the consent agenda. And I just wanted to make sure to thank Denise for all her work for us. She keeps us on task and makes sure that these meetings run smoothly, and we couldn't do it without her, so thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Baker.
Mr. Attorney?
Nothing to add.
Madam Clerk?
Thank you all very much.
Mr. Manager?
Only one small thing, and that is we forgot a recognition. and I think we're forgiven because the appropriate staff person didn't know about it. And that is that today is National Fallen Firefighters Memorial Day. And so if you're wondering why the flags are at half-mast, that's why. So in addition to honoring police and others from earlier in the meeting, we also want to honor the firefighters in our state who have fallen in the line of duty.
Yes, I just want to reiterate, we couldn't do anything without the amazing staff that we have. You know, we have about 103 full-time employees, about 40 part-time employees, and they do an incredible job. And you see it day in and day out. And yes, we're recognizing the firefighters, we're recognizing our police, we are recognizing the entire staff that put so much work into our budget, which was so hard. You know, it would be so great if we could just run the city and not have to deal with more taxes. But we have to balance. We have to balance the needs. We have to balance what's happening in really the economic environment that we live in. And we have to take care of the people that work for us with cost of living and making sure that the jobs are properly compensated. So I just want to say thank you to everybody. And of course, thank you to our city clerk, who once again had to correct me. And, you know, I would have messed up the opening for city council and not introduced anyone if Denise had not kicked me under the table and told me I was messing up again. But everybody, it's a team. And that's what makes this city function, is teamwork. And it's the collaboration. It is the caring about one another, and it is working together across departments and working between our elected officials and our staff. It is all that teamwork and working with the public, who we all work for, that makes Brevard such a very, very special place. So thank you to the staff for everything. And just a reminder to the public that May 18th is the public hearing on the budget. So that is the formal night when you get to come. The budget is out there. There are copies online. There are copies, as Wilson said, I think in the library, in the entrance to this building. Take a look at it, and if you don't agree with what's in it, come and tell us. Let us know. But that is your opportunity to have us listen to what you think about the budget. And I think with that, we are ready for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
We are adjourned. Thank you, everybody.